Conversations With, a podcast series exploring the people and practices shaping the impact of private philanthropy to benefit communities across Africa. Conversations With is produced by the Africa Grantmakers Affinity Group, working to promote robust, effective, and responsive philanthropy and to build a network of informed, engaged, and connected funders. Visit the africagrantmakers.org website for program notes and to join our mailing list.
Welcome to Conversations With. I'm Niamani Mutima, Executive Director of the Africa Grantmakers Affinity Group. And I'm very pleased today to welcome Ese Emerhi, who's the Project Director of the Kiisi Trust Fund that is based in Port Harcourt in the River State of Nigeria. Welcome, Ese. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you so much, Niamani. I'm really excited to chat this afternoon about the work we're doing here in Ogoni Land.
So, Ese, why don't we start with you sharing with us how the trust fund was established and why it was established?
Yeah, absolutely. The trust was created almost over a decade ago through the lawsuit of Shell versus Wiwa, which was settled out of court in New York. This came about from Ken Saro-Wiwa and 9 other gentlemen who fought against the environmental destruction of the oil extraction in Ogoni Land, specifically against Shell Oil Company and the federal government of Nigeria. The Shell versus Wiwa case awarded the 9 families $15.5 million, and they collectively decided to set aside $5 million to create the Kiisi Trust Fund, with the hope that the fund will be used to benefit the people of Ogoni Land. They hope that the fund will be used for a number of initiatives: community development, women's programs, healthcare, education. But their hope for the fund was that it would really be a true testament to the legacy of those who died for the creation of the trust fund. Since then, since 1990, the fund lay dormant for a number of years before coming back to life in 2016, when the trustees of the board then decided to select TrustAfrica to manage the fund as a donor advised fund on behalf of the trustees for the benefit of Ogoni people. I was recruited as the first project director to come on board in 2017 to lead their thinking around the strategic thinking around what grant making in Ogoni Land would look like, and to begin to operationalize the intentions of those who died and lived for the creation of the fund. So truly, the fund has been in operation, direct operation, since 2017, with the creation of a new board and also the inauguration of an advisory council. We also have our own governance structure that is separate from TrustAfrica. So Kiisi Trust has a board of directors that is made up predominantly of Ogoni people, as well as an advisory council that is again made up of predominantly Ogoni representatives and nonprofit experts, Niger Delta experts who are very familiar with the context of working and developing Ogoni. So I work with these 3 different parties in our grant making work and other components of the trust.
Since the trust was established, how has it been working to benefit the Ogoni people?
We have now evolved in our thinking of what that phrase now means. So for the benefit of the Ogoni people, as you can imagine, can be interpreted in a number of different ways. When the trust fund was first started back in the 90s, and even before it came to TrustAfrica to manage, there was always the impression initially that the fund would be a spend down fund. So just spend down the $5 million. Once the funds are spent, then we close shop and walk away. That was one approach, or at least one thinking of how the funds would be managed. Once TrustAfrica came on board and the local board itself started sort of operating, the thinking changed to wanting the trust to be a community foundation that lasts into perpetuity. And so part of that means fundraising to increase the endowment that we already have, as well as really understanding the challenges and opportunities that Ogonis have. When we started in 2017/2018 with our first grants, we focused on working directly with local community-based organizations, CBOs. These were organizations that, for many, of over 90% of them, had never received a grant before. And so with that, we understood that there will be some capacity challenges in terms of implementing the projects that they were responsible for. There would be leadership, institutional leadership capacities, board governance matters, for instance. And we were willing to work with local CBOs as a way through, at a time, in terms of understanding what benefiting the Ogoni people. I think there were stakeholders who assumed that the fund was strictly for the benefit of Ogoni businesses or Ogoni nonprofit organizations. And that sort of pigeoned the work of the trust fund too narrowly and did not allow us to really explore. As you imagine, the working with CBOs, we were using small grants. These are grants of $10,000 or less. The average was about $7,000. And with $7,000, $8,000, the impact, the reach of any particular project would naturally be very small. And the board felt that because the impact and the reach isn't being seen, in the last year, we have started to pivot towards working now with larger institutions or larger organizations, more directly with federal and government bodies. Maybe it could be the Ministry of Agriculture with the Agri Extension Services. It could be with the Ministry of Education around curriculum and schools in Ogoni land. It could be with the health board around building a better resourced health clinics in the rural parts of Ogoni, with the thinking that working with these larger institutions that have a mandate to work in Ogoni, their impact and their reach will be felt more. The blowback or the pushback that we've received by just working with CBOs was that it just wasn't seen. Nobody was seeing the work that we were doing, and they wanted more visibility. They wanted more access. They wanted more communication. So in the past year, we've been slowly working towards that direction, revising our strategy to include more of these stakeholders and to ensure that the impact is truly felt. It's one thing to say, okay, for the benefit of the Ogoni people, if we were to dump $1 million into building a new health facility in Bodo, that would be for all Ogonis, then that's one impact. That is benefiting the Ogoni people. But it might mean that the fund is $1 million less. So how do we sort of navigate both demands or both pools in terms of having bigger infrastructure like projects and also working with local communities who may not need something fancy, but they may need access to clean water simply, or just educational awareness on health issues.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges?
I would say the biggest legacy from the lawsuit or from over the fight and the campaigns against IOCs is the fact that this is a region, this is a community that actively trades in conflict, or sometimes, and sometimes even violent conflict. Ogoni land is not post-conflict. It is still in conflict. And what that does, not only to the psyche, but also to just in terms of development in this region, is that things move at a slower pace, and it hampers even thinking, the mindset of people to understand what sustainable development is all about. So the biggest challenge that we've had in working with CBOs, or even engaging with stakeholders, is working through conflict. Every aspect of the grants that we have given, and now we have given grants to 35 organizations, every aspect of that project has a conflict mitigation or a peace building component that is built into that project, whether it's peaceful community entry, whether it's engaging with tribal leaders, or even engaging with youth leaders who also are trying to find their own space, their own voice within all of this. IOCs that have worked in this region have created a culture of demand where community activists or courtists, so to speak, are used to demanding certain things from oil companies, and then they give back or they pay financially for that. And so that MO of working obviously isn't something that's sustainable for an organization. A community foundation like the Trust, we can't pay away every violent clash that occurs. And so sometimes the solutions we come up with in terms of dialoguing, in terms of meeting people face to face to find out really what is the crux of the matter, it takes time. And in a community that is wrought by conflict, that is wrought by poverty, extreme poverty, the ability to think long term is not a luxury that many people have. And so our projects, our funded projects, need to have an immediate outcome. They need to have almost a next day result that people can touch and feel. And livelihood matters are things that are particularly challenging where the Trust has shied away, or maybe not, I won't say shied away, the Trust has not prioritized livelihood initiatives, startup packs for businesses, for instance, youth leadership initiatives, not because they don't work, but because these are things that other donors, other partners, even the government, local, all the way to the federal government, are already doing. And so we don't want to duplicate those same efforts, especially with limited funds or with funds that have not yet doubled or we are in the process of increasing that pool. So those things work, but other partners are taking the lead in them. But in terms of the real challenges, it's still conflict. It's poverty, is access sometimes to those who are making the decisions on matters that need to happen in Ogoni land. And on top of all of this, there is the ongoing Ogoni cleanup exercise that is being pushed by the federal government in partnership with IOCs who were the prime sort of violators of the land to begin with. This Ogoni cleanup exercise has a massive livelihood component to it. It has a massive health initiative component to it. But the cleanup of the land is something that would take over 30 years, and it's something that would cost in the billions of dollars to achieve. And it's been slow going. I think the high prep Ogoni cleanup exercise coincidentally ramped up around the same time that the Kiisi Trust Fund became active in Ogoni land in 2017. So both of our organizations or both of our initiatives are run in parallel, but doing very different approaches to sustainable development in Ogoni.
So how does the Kiisi Trust Fund interface with the local community? How do you identify the organizations that you're funding? And do you work in any specific areas?
Yeah, so the Trust Fund, we currently give funds in 7 thematic areas: peace building, youth skills, women's programs, health, agriculture, environmental rights, governance. These are things around voice, accountability, transparency. And then the last one is around education or adult literacy. So these are the 7 thematic areas that we fund in. Predominantly, we work through identifying prospective grantees through the Advisory Council. Now, this is a local body. It constitutes of 9 individuals. 6 of them are Ogonis, and then the other 3 are Niger Delta nonprofit experts. Now, these individuals are closer to the ground. They know the communities in Ogoni, and they recommend to the trust organizations that they know doing well, but may not have the visibility or may need some additional resources. That recommendation stops at the point of just telling me or my staff that organization A, for instance, that works in health in a particular community in Kana, local government area, might be interested in applying for a grant. And then my staff and I would then reach out to that organization and encourage them to apply for a grant. Our grant cycles, we used to hold 4 grant cycles every year. So that's basically 1 a quarter. But it became sort of, we felt a little bit like we were like a hamster in a wheel, just going from grant cycle to grant cycle to grant cycle. And it didn't really allow us the time to monitor, evaluate, and really get to know the challenges our grantees are working with. So we've changed from a 4 grant cycle to a 2 grant cycle per year. These organizations that come recommended from the council are then voted on by the council on terms of merit. So just because maybe a council member recommended organization Y, it doesn't mean that that organization actually ends up getting a grant. They still have to go through our due diligence process. They still have all grants are done on merit, on the capacity or the potential of that organization to achieve or implement that project. They still have to have the right requirements in terms of registration. They still have to have the internal checks and balances within the organization to ensure that the funds will be used appropriately. So not all recommendations end up getting funded. And since 2017, since we started, we've built up a pool of organizations, a network, if you will, of organizations that have come from Ogoni that we can always refer and go back to. But this is where the catch-22 comes back to bite us. And this is why the trust has decided to move away from prioritizing small grants. Because the community is small, we're talking about approximately less than 1 million individuals, 1 million inhabitants in Ogoni land. It's everybody knows everybody. And the organizations, CBOs, true CBOs, are a handful. And we didn't want to get into the situation where we're recycling our grantees because it's only 20 or it's only 15 or whatever magic number it ends up being that qualifies for the grants. We wanted the opportunity to enlarge that pool and work with larger institutions who may not be based in Ogoni, but who have a mandate or who have an interest in working and improving the lives of Ogonis. It's the close-knit community of organizations, CBOs.
So what have been some of the highlights for you when you have seen the impact of the work that the Trust is doing?
One of the biggest one outside of grant making, so I shouldn't probably not only focus on grant making, the Trust does other things as well. The biggest one is the Ogoni Scholarship Fund. Education, as I mentioned, is one of the thematic funding areas of the Trust. And we have on both the council and also on the board seasoned education expertise, a former VC of UST, for instance, who sits on our board. And so education is something that is vital and really, really important. And the creation of the Ogoni Scholarship Fund was to provide final year students in colleges and universities anywhere in Nigeria the opportunity to do their research papers financially free. So we would just sponsor their financial research work, their papers. We have now expanded that to now include students from second year all the way to their fourth year with scholarships that would help them go through their entire education career as long as they keep to the set criteria that we have. We are about to roll out the second phase of the Ogoni Scholarship Fund, and we are hoping to award anywhere between 300 and 500 scholarships to Ogoni students from second year to the third year. This is an initiative that we hope would double and triple as the years go by, where we can be able to say, maybe after 3-5 years, that we have provided assistance to thousands of Ogoni students throughout their college career. The second area in terms of success or in terms of big impact or achievements is the Ogoni Next Gen internship program, which we run internally at the Trust. Right now, we have cycled out 6 interns from this program, and we are about to start the third class of the internship program. This is a program that provides leadership, that provides educational opportunities and learning opportunities to young Ogoni people who have an interest in a career in the nonprofit sector. They spend anywhere from 3 months to 12 months with us as a team, working on different aspects of grant management, on communications, on community relations, on monitoring and evaluation, with the hope that that 1 year would entice them into thinking about a career in a nonprofit and not only wanting to work for an oil company or work for the government or be a doctor or that you can have a successful career in a nonprofit. And so this is our attempt in terms of grooming the next generation of civic society leaders, not just in Ogoni, but across the Niger Delta.
You've shared with us the work of the Kiisi Trust, the challenges that you have encountered, and the challenges of working in a conflict environment. Do you have any insights or lessons that you would like to share about how to navigate this type of environment?
I think the biggest learning, or I guess insight, is that if you go into work in an environment like this, you have to be in it for the long haul. There are no quick, easy wins. And in addition to that, a lot of the work that you do is around building trust. Even before the first check is cut, even before the first dollar is awarded to a prospective grantee or to a grantee, we spend a lot of time getting to know our grantees. We spend a lot of time working with them to ensure that the projects truly have that altruistic measure or element to them. As one of my trustees keeps saying, that this is an exercise in changing mindset, because the mindset of the average Ogoni man or woman is one that is filled with anger, is one that is filled with mistrust. So in the beginning, people were like, who's TrustAfrica? Who's Kiisi Trust? These are new players. Why should we listen to them? Why are they here? There's been so many broken promises over the years from one stakeholder to the other, from the federal government to the local government to even civil society actors as well. So you have conflict, you have anger, you have mistrust. And sometimes, when it feels like you're not even doing anything, maybe it's just a simple conversation, just hanging out with people. That helps to build that trust. And that's why I say that, you have to be, if you're going to work in conflict environments, you have to be here in the long haul. And you have to understand that there's a lot of psychological elements or components to their communities, their stakeholders, their partners that you are dealing with. Almost feels like sometimes dissecting and overanalyzing every word that somebody says. Do they really mean this? Do they have a different agenda? Do they have a hidden agenda? You would think that those that are around you, that are closest to you, you don't have to have that suspicion. But sometimes you do, because they also are operating in the same environment as well. And subconsciously, they are also victims to what has been happening generationally as well. So you have to be sensitive to that. I think another insight or a lesson learned is that it isn't about the money, or it shouldn't be about the money. And that's one of the reasons why conflict or even peace building initiatives globally have the lowest percentage in terms of donors funding that, because it can become its sinkhole. There's no amount of money that you can throw at it that will suddenly eradicate the problem. Even if we were to put billions into it, there still will be conflict, there still will be tension, there still will be misunderstanding. And so really understanding what conflict mitigation and peace building elements are in the work that you do, and that's why we try to build it into every single grant that we give, is critical. The rehabilitation of courtiers, for instance, who operate freely in Ogoni, that is an exercise, that is a body of work that no one actor can handle. The federal government alone can't do it. The army alone can't do it. Tribal leaders alone can't do it. And certainly not us with our small little money, with 5 million that you can just easily sink into a peace building project. One peace building project, we certainly can't do it alone. So it does mean bringing all of these different players together and having regular dialogues or just regular understanding of what it means to work and live and play in Ogoni. The sad reality for Ogonis right now, because of the environmental damage, decades of environmental damage, their biggest economic activity that happens now is funerals. And that's a horrible reality to live through. Every weekend there's a funeral. Ogonis are literally dying and have every right to be angry about that fact. And so any intervention, any new player, whether it's the Kiisi Trust, whether it's Ford Foundation or whoever else, has to, in many ways, humble themselves first, to listen, to be open, and to use true participatory community grant-making principles to answer or resolve any problems or any potential problems. Many of these things probably won't be resolved in my lifetime, but we hope at least that lives of some Ogonis can be better through the other initiatives that we work in.
Ese, you've talked about the complexities and the dynamics of working in the Delta region with the community. And as we both know, very often the phrase is used to listen to the community. So how have you navigated this landscape in terms of listening to the community, but also identifying who the community is?
It's a process we're still learning. I guess maybe I could ask the question is how is it possible to let the community decide when they themselves don't know, right? And it's not, we tried that route, that's sort of grassroots, homegrown, let the community go out to the community, listen to them. The solutions, the approaches that were being solicited or at least being recommended or thrown back at us were things that we knew would not really have a long-term sustainable development. There's issues around capacity, and there's only, that listening to the local community, I feel like really is only effective in peaceful situations or communities. It's not an effective strategy in an environment that every weekend, every day, somebody is dying. You don't have that luxury to have that approach, because it's an approach that will come back to bite you in the butt, which it has for us numerous times. We've come in with some true and tested approaches elsewhere that we can try to implement and roll out here. You're right in terms of who is the community and who are our stakeholders. Our stakeholders, those who have leadership positions only in Ogoni, are our stakeholders over the IOCs, international oil companies that are working in the region? Is it other civil society actors? Or is it the market woman in a rural community area? Is she and her family our stakeholders? Are those the people that we answer to? Is the board directly the only person that we answer to? So these are some of the questions that we are constantly grappling with. And sometimes I think, in this aspect, we have to realize and be very frank with ourselves that we can't be everything to everybody. Even the 7 thematic areas that we're currently funding, I think there are probably 3 or 4 too many. We need to say these are the 3 or 4 things that the trust is doing, whether health will always be one, environment will always be one, education will always be an area that we focus on. For us to just really say these are the 4 areas that we fund in, and everything else we do not fund. We do not work in those areas. We can participate in conferences and dialogues and meetings. We can provide solutions to those things, but we don't fund or give money in those areas. I think we are getting to that stage with the trust to be able to firmly say this is what we do and this is what we don't do. Now things have been a bit fluid, and so I think that's why everybody thinks that we are the new solution to many of the challenges. It's not easy.
Ese, how has it been for you personally to operate in the type of environment that you have described?
It is not easy at all. And I've had this, I have to constantly, almost on a weekly basis, remind myself why I'm here. Because it's really easy to walk away. Just this morning, I was on a 3-hour phone call with a grantee, just not doing what he had said he would do, and me having to explain and talk to him about the process. And finally, it came down to he was resistant to many of my instructions or so-called instructions because I'm a woman, and 2, I'm not Ogoni. And it was his bias that he cannot take instruction. The Kiisi Trust money very easily, but he cannot then adhere to any protocols or rules that are attached to that funding. He just would not, he refused to adhere to it. So if we're asking for reports, it is when he feels like reporting. If we ask for financial documents, it is if he feels. Just because I'm a woman, it has not been easy. From day one, there has been petitions against me about not being Ogoni. How dare a non-Ogoni decide on the future of the fund? How dare a non-Ogoni tell Ogonis what to do with their money? Thought I had it thick skin before working with human activists in the Middle East and in also dangerous conflict-prone environments, even working on political campaigns in the US. That's also a tough field. So I thought I had it tough a thick skin, but I've had to really grow it here because it is emotionally exhausting at times. Sometimes I'm baffled why I have to fight to do good in this environment. Sometimes just, working with trustees who understand the context, who are very familiar with it. And it's not easy. It really isn't. But there are bursts of sunshine, so to speak, in the work. We do have really amazing grantees who are doing the Lord's work, a miracle essentially, with the tiny amounts of grants that we give. And when they come back and they report on their work, it truly is moving that they really want to give back. They really want to do. And we also see them grow internally as an organization. Before, maybe they didn't have any financial protocols within the organization, but they now understand and have mastered Excel, know how to do proper budgeting, or they now know how to work with their board, because we insist that is one of the requirements that they have to have in order to grow. So there are moments of like, okay, this work is meaningful. I know that it is. And that's really why I'm here. That's why I'm here. I had no reason to leave PIN. I had no reason to leave the World Bank. I was very comfortable there. To come here and then to be insulted, to be abused, to be attacked, to not feel appreciated or valued in the work that you do. But that sometimes isn't really what it's about. It's really trying to ensure that at least people live with some sense of dignity, and people live with some sense of hope that something could be better, or at least different from their current reality that they hear. So I guess the long or short answer is it hasn't been easy. I want to believe that it would get easier as the trust fund really settles into what it is, what it can do effectively, instead of trying to be everything for everybody. And I'm really grateful for the team I have around me, internally with the staff, also with my board and the advisory council. These have been representatives who have stood for me, who have fought the battles with me, who go out directly into the communities to speak, and not on my behalf, but on the trust behalf, that this is what we're trying to do. So I know they also get the hits, they also get the attacks. And it's good to have that family of supporters around who you can lean on and just sort of take a breather. And it's also good to have supporters like you and others across the globe. So that, I think having that support makes the work a lot easier.
So we're having this conversation against the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's March of 2020. And as the pandemic spreads across the globe, how is your community responding to this, and how is it affecting the work that you're doing?
Well, two things. There's general panic and or confusion in the country around if COVID-19 is really a serious pandemic that we should take seriously. Locally here in the city, River State has been on lockdown for 2 weeks now. And there's no prescribed end date for that. I think at least to past Easter or the rest of this month. And many businesses have shut down. But I think there's still lack of awareness in the rural areas, in the creeks, about what this actually means. The reality for them is that food prices have gone up. The reality for them is that the limited access they had to health clinics before is now before it was limited, now is restricted. And the weird thing is, though, that TrustAfrica and the Kiisi Trust are doing a number of things in terms of making things easier for our grantees, but grantees haven't actually reported back to me the challenges that they have. I've had to go out to them and say, I know that you are struggling with this, or this will soon be a new challenge for you or a new reality for you. How can we as a trust help you through this? And so it's finding those grantees that I know that are struggling and going to them and working with them. It's been a case-by-case basis. But on the whole, the grantees haven't come to the trust to say that this is what they need or this is what they want. I was talking with colleagues in TrustAfrica about their unique privilege we have, you and I, and some organizations, to be able to work virtually or to be able to work remotely. Even on this call, we've had challenges with technology, but for the most part, this is the tool that we use to stay connected. I know that none of my 35 grantees have that luxury, not a single one. They are not able to be on a internet web call with me for an hour. Even 30 minutes would be a stretch. And so we have started to think about new ways to work with them. They may not always see my email. They may not always see my newsletter. They may not be able to read online about the work or the opportunities or the other things. We have to do it the old-fashioned way, mostly. And so I think this post-COVID-19 world would mean a reevaluation of how we engage with our grantees. Maybe now I may have to say, okay, we'll accept hard copies of grant applications. We haven't considered that before, but maybe that might be the new reality in terms of working with them. It may mean increasing their grants to include different ways for them to gather physically or not physically. Physical gatherings of 20 or 10 people or more is now prohibited. And many of the activities are hands-on, livelihood type activities. It will force us to think, it may limit us to the type of activities or projects we fund. It could mean that no more agricultural, agribusiness grants. It could mean no more civic awareness or engagement grants. Those that are able to use technology effectively might be the new winners in all of this. So it's been a conversation I've had internally with my staff. How can we work differently? It's not just providing no-cost extensions to grantees. That really, while that is a great help to some, it is not the solution to what they really are working with, because it means for a lot of them, the activities just simply stop. So I can't give no cost extensions to the end of the year. They won't, they still won't move forward. So I need to think of creative new ways. One of the criticisms of the trust is that we are not, the staff, that is myself and my staff, the interns, even our trustees, that we are not visible enough. And it's because of the security issue. Well, we may have to just bite that fear and bite that bullet and be more visible now and be more out in the community and actually have them see us and work directly with them. There's no easy answer. I think COVID-19 has caused a lot of us to reevaluate how we work, and also just to simply admit the privilege some of us have to be able to work virtually or to work remotely. I've talked to some donors in the region about how they are now operating and how what new things that they are doing. The response I've received is that we are just waiting to see what will happen. There's no solution coming out, which is frustrating. Everyone is just sort of in a wait and see mode, which really isn't helpful when people are literally struggling with moving on from day to day. I think the other aspect I wanted to talk about was, I don't know if it's part of the legacy of working through conflict or working through crisis. Even in Ogoni, even working with our grantees, there is this strong resistance to talk about the true challenges organizations are experiencing. And I don't know, I know it is part of that power dynamic between donor and grantee, or somebody who has the opportunity to make decisions on behalf of you in favor or against. Calling my grantees and asking them, what are your challenges? I'm met with a lot of silence. And it's almost like pulling teeth. And so there's the awkward dance of me not trying to tell them what I think the problem is, but you can't listen in silence. So you need something back. So I'm like, is this where you're having problems, or would this cause a problem? Or, finding new ways to talk to them. And then finally, I think it's part of that building trust aspect that I talked about. Some of them haven't yet, even though they've taken our money, haven't yet trusted us or don't yet trust us to be 100% honest with their challenges, which we then see in their reports, which we then see in how they're implementing their projects. But with COVID-19, there's even more of a hesitation to share how this is impacting them, because I think they feel like they will be penalized for it, or that it's a problem that they should be able to resolve on their own, because no one really is talking about it. I'm aware of a few organizations where the staff all had desktops. And now that everybody is forced to work from home or be at home, their staff can't work. They just can't work because they don't have laptops. So it's just stopped. So it's meant for that organization. COVID-19 has been an expensive experience because they've had to now buy either really expensive smartphones or tablets or laptops for their staff so that they can work. Because otherwise it was just going to be silence for the next month or two. So it's hard. It's hard. I think this new reality, this new world of post-COVID-19, I often think that we all now have to be really comfortable working in that uncertain, grayish world where answers are not just black and white. I think that's a new skill that many of us are going to have to develop if we want to adapt and if we want to thrive in this new post-COVID-19 world.
Ese, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. This has been a great conversation. We've learned a lot about the work of the Kiisi Trust, and we look forward to hearing more.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Conversations With. We hope you enjoyed it. Please visit our website at africagrantmakers.org and join our mailing list. Until our next Conversations With, be well.